All right. All right, here we go. A memory. It was a perfect day in the underground for gardening. The midday sun was illuminating Asgore's throne room through some crevices, golden petals seemingly aglow under the light. The king was happily trimming branches and pulling weeds up from around his flowers, as he always did since what seemed like an eternity to him. Setting down his gardening tools on the ground to take a small rest, Asgore let his gaze wander around the room, inspecting his handiwork. There was still a bit of work to do, it seemed. His eyes trailed on the form covered by a dusty white blanket next to a window, the ground beneath it completely devoid of any plant whatsoever. His soul was suddenly struck by a pang of desperate longing. Asgore wanted to see her again, to hold her in his arms so much, but she could never forgive what he had done. Not even he could. A small cough interrupted his thoughts, startling him. "Oh, I didn't even notice you come in," Asgore said, a smile instantly forming on his face as he turned around. "How may I—" His nascent smile disappeared even faster than it had appeared. The remaining words stuck in his throat at the sight of the large, iron-clad figure of Royal Guard No. 7. Or, more precisely, the sleeping human child he was carrying within his arms. Asgore's mouth closed and opened a few times, but no words came out. His mind went blank. This was so sudden. Too sudden. He's not ready. He can't. The figure in Seven's arms stirred, the latter deciding to lay them down on the ground. After a respectful salute, the royal guard quietly took his leave. The king watched, still frozen, as the child groggily awoke and sat up, a few petals falling out of their hair. They muttered, rubbing their eyes before looking around. "Whoa!" they exclaimed, now wide awake. "It's so beautiful!" Turning to Asgore, the human said, "Is this your garden? It's amazing!" They beamed, seemingly unafraid of the boss monster who stood at more than twice their height. Asgore flinched, not quite knowing how to answer. The human paused. "Are you okay? You don't look so—" "Oh." Suddenly realizing something, their happiness dampened. "You're that Asgore guy that I'm supposed to fight." The king of monsters nodded, unwilling to meet their gaze. "It is what we must do. I am sorry, truly." Silence. Asgore didn't know how long they stayed there, neither of them saying anything. His gaze was still set at his feet. Now that their journey was over, what did they feel? Were they angry, resentful, scared, fearful? He couldn't see the child's eyes, but he could feel the weight of the child's gaze boring into him, judging him. After what felt like millennia, he finally dared to look up. What met him was their eyes, looking straight at his. I understand, but—" the human said, their voice shaking alongside their body, trying to keep themselves together. Do we really need to do this now? It's not like I could go away. Mr. Seven told me about the barrier." Their eyes welled up, voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to fight," they said. "Please." Asgore stuttered. "Of course." What was he saying? "We can wait until you're ready." The human slumped, almost falling to the ground, letting out the breath they were holding.
"Thank you,"
they said, wiping their tears, smiling brightly.
So much."
Why am I even doing this? This is just delaying the inevitable, a part of him thought. But another part retorted that this was the child's last wish, and one that they could give. They only wanted a bit more time. Time that he too wanted. Well, I'll be waiting for you in the next room whenever you make up your mind, Asgore said. Take your time.
"Actually, Mr. King,"
they interrupted, shifting on their feet. They pointed to the ground next to him.
"would you mind showing me how to..."
Asgore blinked, looking down at his gardening tools that he had put down earlier. You want me to teach you how to garden? The human nodded bashfully. Taken aback, Asgore tugged at his beard, thinking for a few moments. Finally, a small smile appeared on his lips. I don't see why not. I still have some work to do, after all. Both of them toiled for the entire day. The human turned out to be a natural. Like a sponge, they eagerly absorbed all the knowledge and tricks Asgore showed them, to the point that the latter didn't even have to say or do anything by the end. They could already do it all on their own. Oh, how happy they seemed. It was as if all their fear and apprehension had disappeared without a trace, replaced by boundless energy and enthusiasm, which somehow spread to Asgore too. For those few hours, he too forgot his burdens, forgot about the weight on his shoulders. In the blink of an eye, it was already nightfall. The human lay limp amongst the flowers, completely exhausted, their grin remaining on their face. Just like his children used to, long ago. By second nature, he lifted them in his arms, walking towards the exit. He saw their tired eyes frown, confused. No, I can't just leave you there, can I? You'd catch a cold, Asgore chuckled. I have extra beds at home. You could surely make a better use of them than I could. The human's face relaxed, and they gripped his cloak tightly. Barely a few minutes later, Asgore arrived at his house. After making sure there were no other monsters inside and locking the door, he would normally leave his home open for any to come, but this time was an exception. He entered his late children's room. He looked at both beds with a heavy heart before deciding to tuck the human into Kara's bed. Barely in bed, the child was already nodding off.
"I had so much fun today,"
they said sleepily.
"Will we do it again?"
Maybe, Asgore said after a small pause. Then he smiled. I'll see you tomorrow. They closed their eyes at his words, satisfied. Asgore got out of the room, quietly closing the door. He could already feel himself excited to wake up tomorrow. No. This was wrong. He was already growing attached to them. If he let this happen, he wouldn't be able to hold the promise that he had made to himself, to his people. How could he back down now, after he had declared war on humans, after he had promised monsters freedom, promised them vengeance for the 1,000 years of imprisonment, of despair and suffering, after the humans killed his own child, shattering everyone's hope for peace? This was their only hope now. Asgore put his hand on the wall, staggering, the other covering his face. He had to make a choice. Whichever he chose, he'd have to suffer the consequences for the rest of his life. He let out a quiet sob. Tears fell from beneath his fingers. The human child didn't see Asgore the next day. The end.
can't tell.
So that story was it was kind of like my story that I first wrote. It was a fan fiction of a fan fiction.
I
You
know
wrote a
what
fanfic of my story?
You did.
What?
Who did? I thought so, but I
What?
was. It sounded kind of like mine, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Who wrote it?
Well, he goes by the name of Aldhere on the server, but you know him better as Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry wrote
Great.
a fan fiction of Jeff's story?
Yep,
That's great.
he did.
Wow.
Yeah, he didn't see your whole story, but I had posted the little section where you talked about that human,
Yeah.
about how you get to the end and you say
Yeah.
the human didn't see Asgore the
Yeah.
next day or whatever,
Yeah.
which I thought was yikes. And I think he liked it so much. Yeah, he liked it so much that he decided to write his own little version of it
He
with
did
some extra details
Put
and
a
all.
name in there, though.
And he thought that you would enjoy it.
Okay. Great.
Anyway, so there you go.
Jerry.
Yep. So if you ever see Jerry on Shell Shockers next time,
He's not going to be very nice about it.
You're like, oh yeah, I did it because I had to. I was bored. I had nothing else to do.
He'll be like your lame story.
oh yeah, hope you like the story, kid.
Yeah, it was
I
so
really like
lame.
it. I like it when kids die.
He's like, it was so bad, I had to make it better.
Well, that's probably not what was going through his mind.
What if he's saying this Jerry, like saying a character when you tell him that?
Yeah, maybe his character really is Jerry.
Oh, dear.
Here's your story. All right.
Great.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. So there you go. You've gotten a fan fiction of your own story.
Great. You should send him both my stories.
I probably could if you wanted.